Hark the bardic paladin, who sings and plays again. He tells the tales of glory, and weaves a magic story. He'll join you at your table, and ask you to share a fable. Heroes of humble origin, villains who must be fought again. No matter their skill or prowess, the people in life are countless. So we pray you heed our request. Enjoy this tale of sidekicks and side quests.
Episode 78, The Collector, Legendary Gentleman Thief. Welcome to Sidekicks and Side Quests, the Dungeons & Dragons podcast that helps to put humans back into humanity and breathe life into your campaign NPCs with backstory and bravado. That's right, we're building a world, one character at a time. I am your host, Kurt Krenwelge, the Bardic Paladin, and I'll be joining Daniel Silver's table in the Levitating Platter. Hello everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Sidekicks and Side Quests, the best unofficial Dungeons & Dragons podcast, in my humbly biased opinion. We've got a wonderful returning guest for you, and wouldn't you like to know who it is after this first ad read from Plus One EXP? Tony Vicinda is the mastermind behind his mastercraft of beard balms, game design, and community building. He's got a beard balm named after all of the basic stats from D&D, so get a can, apply it to your face, and smell the sweet aroma and the sweet victory that comes along with increased strength, dexterity, charisma, and more. Beards and Beyond is the indie RPG that helped to launch this brand, but Tony has collaborated and developed several other projects, including Repugnant, Eye Toaster, Down We Go, Through the Void, Vamp Nugula, Brand Standing, and more. If you support Plus One EXP either by buying something from the website or going to tonyplusone.itch.io, it all helps funnel into the Plus One Forward program, which seeks to support additional indie tabletop content creators to continue making awesome stuff. So I would highly encourage you to follow Tony and Plus One EXP on all the socials, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, in order to keep up with all of the various projects that are being worked on, as well as upcoming interviews, one-shots, and actual plays of some of these other amazing games. And if you don't mind, when you go to the website plus1exp.com, type in the code Randolph when you're buying a beard balm or a beard RPG in order to get some savings on your purchase at no extra cost to you. Again, that code is Randolph, like in episode 2, at the checkout on the website plus1exp.com. Well, hello, returning guest. How are you doing today? Would you mind catching us up, reintroducing yourself to the podcast, telling us who you are and what is it that you do?
Hi, Kurt. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Daniel Silver. I'm an Eastern Orthodox Christian in the DC area and currently a full-time student at James Madison University studying communications and information technology.
I remember that you and I last spoke kind of at the early part of the pandemic back in 2020. So it was really when this podcast was really getting up off the ground. So it seems like since between now and then you've gone back to school. Is there any particular prompting that encouraged you to go back to school?
You know, I think during the pandemic, I just took stock of what I had been doing and what I wanted to be doing, and going back to school was the kind of best thing to do that to go forward.
Is this a master's or a PhD or what kind of a degree?
No, I'm actually finishing up my undergrad. So
okay.
I did not finish my undergrad. I just went right into working, and I've had a variety of jobs over the years. And at this point, when I took inventory during the pandemic, I realized that not having that undergrad was kind of, closing a lot of doors, and I just going to have so many more opportunities once I finish that up.
Communications and information technology, does that have to do with the work that you're doing, say, like with a Doxacon?
Yeah, it does.
Like
I think there's going to be a lot of skills there that I'll be able to use in Doxacon in doing the conference and planning and things like that, and just making it even better.
Yeah, so moving along here in our catch-up section, as it were, since you're a returning guest, You told us last time when you were on the show that you got your start in the tabletop world with GURPS and how that's affected your history with Dungeons and Dragons. So certainly, you can remind us again for us new listeners who maybe don't know, but during the pandemic and such, did you have an opportunity to play D&D or other types of tabletop role-playing games since the last time we spoke?
Yeah, so when we talked last, I was in the middle of running an online game of Dungeon World, which is a powered by the apocalypse game. And I was running that for 14 players. Actually, we were doing a West Marches style campaign where people kind of drop in and out for different sessions. So each session will have about 4 to 5 players, but it's all this like kind of large open sandbox where things that happen in one session affect the next session and so on. And so everyone's like playing in the same world.
Yeah.
That group stayed together for about a year and a half after that. We played 2 other campaigns of Masks and Urban Shadows, which are 2 more powered by the apocalypse systems. One, a kind of superhero game, the other one, an urban fantasy one. And, I kept track of the games I had played. And, from March of 2020 to March of 2021, it was a really busy year for me as a game master. I ran games at Gen Con and as well as several regular groups that I had. And I tallied it up and I ran 125 sessions in total in that time period.
That's a lot. That's a lot of gaming to be doing.
Yeah, at the height of the pandemic, when we couldn't do anything else, that Dungeon World group and we were running like 3 to 4 sessions a week at that point. I was running several other groups at the time. There was one day where I ran 3 sessions in one day, and so yeah, just a lot going on there.
Awesome. Hey, some people would say that's the dream, isn't it?
I think so. I calculated it out, and like I normally run like 1 or 2 groups, one game like a month or something. And so I calculated out on the 125 sessions, I think it was like the equivalent of like 7.5 years of gaming or something. So
Okay, so it was a lot of powered by the apocalypse, but was there an opportunity for some more GURPS or more D&D? I know at the time of this recording, we just had some major D&D drops with the D&D direct stream that they just did. So like we're getting Spelljammer and it's some kind of Dragonlance product is coming out as well and later this year.
yeah, I ran one short homebrewed D&D campaign for some friends. But I'm mostly playing Power by the Apocalypse or something like Blades in the Dark, which is Power by the Apocalypse adjacent these days. So I also have some friends who are, writing their own things. And so I tend to do a lot of play testing for them as well.
They're involved with like the DMs Guild online and stuff, maybe.
Yeah, or they're doing some of them write for things with like Magpie Gaming, which is Powered by the Apocalypse and stuff like that. So or they're writing their own systems and things like that, and so I'm helping them out with that.
Yeah, our also guest of the show and a mutual acquaintance of ours, Alexi Sargent of Cloven Pine Games, I think just got a credit with Magpie Games.
Yeah, he wrote one of the playbooks for the new Avatar, The Last Airbender game that came out, and he's actually the one that I do play testing for. So I just finished up a campaign of his where he has like a space opera game where it's kind of like Firefly meets Star Wars. So I did that, and then he's writing a new one where you play squires questing, and so we just did some games with him. I was playing with him and his wife Leah. So yeah, that's been what I've been doing lately.
Yeah, I was gonna say when Alexi came on the show, we made the little frog knight guy. So I was joking with him on Twitter, like, "Hey, you got to stick Jasper somewhere in the lore of the game, so
nice.
Some squire can meet a talking frog that believes in the code of chivalry and wants to go rescue a frog maiden from a tower."
Nice.
Awesome. Well, of course, this podcast is Sidekicks and Side Quests. So we always like to ask, since you're a returning guest, in the year and a half, since we last spoke, have you come across any new or interesting sidekick or NPC types out there in the wider world of media?
Well, so I've actually been playing some Destiny 2 lately. It's a science fiction first person shooter that's also kind of massively multiplayer online.
Mhm.
And that's been a way for me to do something with friends online. And they've been having some storylines lately about sides forming up for this kind of large conflict in the solar system that's been bringing a lot of old NPCs back. And so I think the thing I really appreciate about the game storytelling is that they've made us rethink how we view NPCs we thought we knew.
Mm.
So in a recent storyline, a hero from our side, known as Saint 14, actually,
Hmm.
so, a good guy, but we learned that he did some pretty horrible things in the name of good. He encountered some enemies that we had and they came to us for help, and he talked to them and got to know them and learned how they viewed him, and it was very different than how he viewed himself. And on the other side, there's a figure that we've considered a villain for a really long time, suddenly got access to the power of the light, which is how we use our powers.
Mhm.
That's been exclusively ours for a long time, and it really made us kind of reconsider our own powers and what does it mean to be using these powers. And so I find that playing games and reading stories that are different from kind of your normal media really helps spark new ideas, and I would say Destiny 2 has really done that for me.
Interesting. So you were describing the two NPCs, so like the Saint 14, and then I guess this redeeming villain. It almost sounded kind of like a Saint Paul sort of a situation, kind of like from both perspectives, as far as like, oh, this guy that we look up to did some shady stuff in his past, but then someone who's a villain or perceived as a villain actually is like, oh, actually, I had an encounter, or I had a religious experience, and now I've changed my tune, as it were.
Yeah, it really is, and kind of makes us like reconsider, and it made me think about, how could I take maybe familiar NPCs from campaigns and cast them in a new light, maybe, and I think that gives them more depth.
And then also kind of the side quest question as well. Did you come across any new interesting different side quests in your time since we last spoke, and can you tell us more about it?
Um, Let me think about a side quest. Nothing in Destiny 2 comes to mind right away. They tend to do more events rather than
Mm.
side quests. But even then, I just really like they have these really large open areas that you can kind of explore, kind of sandbox style.
Mhm.
And that's just made me think about how can I introduce more exploration into my games.
And then, of course, to kind of round out our little catch up personal interview section, have you acquired any new passions in the interim? And can you tell us a little bit more about them?
I don't think anything new, really new. I mean, what I'm still passionate about is my science fiction fantasy convention, Doxacon, that I help
Mm.
organize in the area. And Doxacon, for your new listeners, is about the intersection of sci-fi and fantasy and faith. And it came about when my priest at the time and I were discussing how our love of these genres really influenced our faith. We have this shared belief in good and evil, the concept of the transcendent, and something beyond this world. And so it only seemed logical to us to bring like-minded geeks and nerds together to talk about these topics. And we've been doing this since 2013, and we've had some really wonderful speakers over the year. The past 2 years we've been virtual, but this year we're going to be back in person. So Doxacon
Wow.
2022 is November 4th and 5th in Bethesda, Maryland, just outside DC.
Wow.
Uh, Tickets will be on sale when this airs, and you can find out more about the conference and purchase tickets at doxacon.org. And our theme for this year is depictions of evil and redemption in sci-fi and fantasy, which I think has a lot to do with role-playing games. I really like having characters who can redeem themselves over the period of a campaign, and it's just such a great medium for that, I think.
I was gonna say, would you be willing to include a certain big Rockstar franchise with redemption in the name by the name of Red Dead Redemption? Because I've been on a Red Dead Redemption 2 kick as of late, and so I'm just being back in the world of kind of like fantasy Wild West is kind of like, yeah, the themes of redemption, memento mori, and all that is heavily present even in the prequel sequel, which is
Yeah, that
Red
would be
Dead
great.
2.
We've talked about video games at DoxCon before. I know we have a couple role-playing game talks this year at Doxacon, and we always have games, at Doxacon as well. So, it's definitely for gamers.
Well, this section of the show has been great. The catch up personal interview section, and now it's time to head into a little segment that I like to call the NPC creation. And NPC creation is brought to you by you, the podcast audience, and our patrons from Patreon. That's right. Now's the time where we give a shout out to our comfortable patrons, those of the $2 plus level, and we're going to give them a loud hurrah. So to you, Katie Downey, aka Goblin Katie, we say cheers. And again, you can get a loud hurrah on every podcast episode if you just go and sign up for $2 a month or more. Katie is actually our highest tier wealthy level. That means she's able to add an element of chance to our random tables here in NPC creation as well, which we might get to use here today. So if you want to find out more information about the cheapest podcast Patreon community out there, check the show notes below or go to my website. You also have the option of just going straight to patreon.com/sidekicks and sidequests to find out more about our 3 tiers, $1, $2, $4, and help us expand our operations here at the Levitating Platter in this demiplane and worlds beyond. So, as you had previously provided me some notes for our recording here today, you have brought forth another character that we're going to be walking our way through the questions and discovering who this character is today. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. This is a kind of repurposed NPC from my mass campaign. He is from a modern superhero setting, but I think he'll still be interesting and relevant even in your setting.
Are we strictly going to like action comic book sort of a world? Or are you taking facets of this character and kind of making it generic fantasy lane?
I'm taking facets of it, and this is just kind of going over his basic motivations and background, and I feel like you could slot this into a lot of different campaigns actually.
All right, fair enough. Well, we'll figure out more about this character as we work our way through. And with the first question, what's the character's name?
So he goes by the name The Collector, but his actual name is Reginald Woodworth II.
Any friendship with Thurston Howell III, perhaps?
They might be members of the same club.
All right, and what is the ancestry of the Collector?
So in my campaign, he was human, but I could see him working as elf, dwarf, halfling. A pretty wide variety of races would actually work well for him.
And then what is the job or role in society for the Collector?
So I think his outward public appearance is that of a kind of landed gentry. But his secret is that he is a legendary gentleman thief who seeks the rarest items for his private collection.
Ooh, okay. Now, I've only ever seen this anime movie one time, and I know of the franchise, but Lupin, the anime Lupin, the Castle of Cagliostro, kind of sounds like that mode of the gentleman thief sort of motif, which I know also comes from classic literature as well.
So. Yes, there's classic literature. I definitely had watched there was a Netflix series of a French series of the classical literature, and so definitely inspired somewhat by that as well.
Okay, very cool. And how old is the Collector then?
In mine, he was in his 70s. If he's a dwarf, an elf, or a halfling, like that could change a little bit, but he's supposed to be on the older side.
And then describe the physical appearance of the Collector of Reginald Woodward II.
Yeah, so he's he's an older kind of gray-haired gentleman. He'll have like either kind of the fine suit or the fine robes of the landed gentry. He likes to be proper and dressed up. He also has a fine cane topped by a very large diamond or some kind of gem or something like that.
And then what 3 adjectives would best describe him?
I would describe him as charismatic, honorable, and determined. He really charms the PCs, but he doesn't play, dishonorable tricks on them. If he makes agreements with them, he keeps them. But, he's very determined to get these items. Getting these items for his collection is really, his main motivation.
And it sounds like maybe with the description, it kind of maybe feeds into this question a little bit. But what's a valuable item, a piece of lore, a secret, or an ideal or concept that the collector ascribes to?
Yeah, so I would say honor, he really has kind of a code that he lives by, and that's very important to him that he keeps that up. As far as like items, lore, secrets, he's really built up a network of informants and suppliers that help him pull off his impressive jobs by getting him intel, building the specialized equipment he uses for different jobs, and that's really key to who he is.
Along with a fine cane with a gigantic diamond on top, I
Yes,
imagine.
which in my superhero thing had some neat gadgets built into it,
Ooh.
and so that that could also be a magical item in a more fantasy setting. So keep that in mind.
What's going to be a particular quest that the collector would be willing to recruit or hire player characters to go and do?
I think the collector would be willing to work with the PCs to take down, an evil villain or overlord, as long as, they have something rare for his collection that he can keep afterwards. He doesn't have this kind of idea of himself as evil necessarily. He kind of views himself as having a code of honor, and part of that code is being willing to steal things. But if there was some evil overlord that the PCs were trying to take down, he'd be up for a team up.
I haven't played this adventure. The big heist adventure that's published by Wizards of the Coast, of course, is the Waterdeep Dragon Heist. It almost
Yes.
kind of sounds funny to be like, let's just drop the collector in here. Like if the player characters maybe are struggling with trying to find an inn or something like that, just be like, oh, here's this elderly gentleman thief that also has it out for the particular villain of the whatever season to determine who it is. And, he has this whole network available. If you just maybe decide to work along with him, he'll lend some of these resources to you. You just have to make sure you grab this particular thing from the villain's collection in order to bring it back to him or something.
Yeah, I think that would be a perfect campaign to drop him into.
So we have to consider with this side quest, what's going to be the reward for success?
I think you kind of mentioned it. He's able to get into even the most secure locations, and as long as the PCs let him take the rare item or get it for him, he doesn't really care what else they might get up to. And so he has this network and these abilities that could be very helpful to the PCs.
All right. And so if the PCs are, a little too overly confident and maybe they bungle this heist or something, what's going to be the consequence of failure? Or if they, have the opportunity to meet him and they don't realize what he's all about and they just refuse to help him, what's going to be the outcome of either of those two consequences?
Well, part of his code is definitely like you don't go back on a deal. And so if the PCs go back on a deal, like I think he would be willing to make life very difficult for them. So, if they attempt to go back on a deal, I think they would be living with some pretty serious consequences. If they, refuse to deal with him at all, like he's probably still going to break into this thing anyway. And if the PCs aren't with him, he really might not care about collateral damage. They might be a convenient distraction for him to get what he needs.
Yes, never mind that we're sneaking our way into the lair of an ancient red dragon. I'll take the one thing I need from the dragon's hoard and I'll let you all deal with the ancient red dragon. Ta-ta.
Exactly. So, he's definitely, is always looking at all the different angles. And, if you're not, working with him and he hasn't made a deal with you, definitely willing to kind of toss you under the bus, as it were.
Or under the nearest behemoth of some kind.
Exactly. Exactly.
What are the goals and motivations for the collector?
So yeah, this is really interesting. When we got into the mask campaign, one of the mechanics of masks is called like look behind the mask, and you are actually like trying to figure out the motivations of the characters. And the PC spent a lot of time trying to figure out the motivation of the collector, and they were wondering like, does he have some kind of evil plan or plot? Is he trying to collect these items to do something with them? And, we eventually just got to the realization that, he just really likes collecting things. And, he wants to have the biggest collection and the most impressive collection, and that's his motivation. And keeping to his code and doing that is really what motivates him.
So a textbook materialist, but keeps a code as far as like how he's going to get the stuff. So it's not just like, oh, I'm going to kill everyone that I need to in order to get this stuff. It's like, no, no, no. I'm going to use my smarts and my intelligence and all my resources to like pull a fast one on you to then get the stuff. And then I have the bragging rights to say, this is in my collection now.
Exactly, exactly.
And with these goals and motivations in mind, how would you say they affect the collector's general personality?
He, in the campaign we did, was always very generous to the PCs, actually. He liked to kind of give them a fair shot, and he would often create items for them. One time, a character was going through some changes in his public persona, and the collector created a very nice costume for him so that he could create a new persona. And so I think the collector, because he doesn't have these kind of larger evil plans, I think just has a very refined sense of like fair play and making things interesting.
How would you say that the collector normally interacts with different groups of people? Is he the same across the board, or is there a difference, say, like with family and friends and peers versus enemies and rivals versus people he works with or has report to him versus player characters? Is he the same, or is he different and nuanced?
I think he's different in nuance because in the campaign, one of the characters ended up being his granddaughter, actually.
Oh.
And they found out. And, talking about kind of redemption, he had not been, very involved in either her life or her parents' life. And when we got to the kind of climax of the campaign, he sacrificed himself to save the granddaughter.
Oh.
And so there was this kind of idea of redemption and this idea of, yeah, he did treat her a little differently. I don't think he would have done that for just anybody else, but because she was family, it made a difference.
Does the collector speak with a particular accent or language? Are there any idiosyncrasies in how he acts and speaks?
When I was doing him in the mass campaign, I had him be from England, and so I think he had a British accent, but he doesn't necessarily need to have any particular accent. You could do a wide variety of them, I think.
What impact has the collector made on the world? How has he shaped the local area?
Well, that's really interesting. He has made a big impact on the characters in the campaign because, he was related to one of them. One of them kind of came to see him as a mentor type. And when he died, she actually took over his network. And so,
Oh.
be kind of came his protege. And so I think he really had a big impact, not so much on like, local politics or the geography, but he really helped a lot of the different characters kind of discover new things about themselves. And, he was always very interested in getting to know them.
And then does the collector have any current problems that prevent him from being a bigger player on the stage? It sounds like maybe the collector, with his code of ethics, with his gentleman thief persona, doesn't sound like he wants to be big and splashy. Maybe he wants to pull off the next great caper, but he's going to do it, with his particular flair and style.
Yeah, I think he's generally pretty happy with I think how his life turned out. I think, if things could be a little different, he might have wanted to be a little closer to some of his family.
Mm.
I think that might be his like one big regret, I think. And so yeah, it's not like he's like, oh, I really want to be the biggest overlord or crime boss in the thing. I think he just like probably wants to spend more time with his family.
Well, we have completed NPC creation, so now it's time to head into a random encounter. And this final segment of the show is brought to you by Reaper Miniatures. They've been Texas Titans of the tabletop industry since 1994. They're here in DFW, and they've got an amazing warehouse and game store. They make everything from paints to gaming accessories, and they stream on Twitch and YouTube with tutorials and interviews. Whatever system you're running, whatever game you are playing, Reaper has a miniature for you. Every time you shop with them, spend at least $40, $50 on your purchase, they're going to give you a cool new mini of the month for free with your order. It's always something new, so all the more reason and incentive to shop with them often. I literally checked my email before we started recording, and you know what? Bing! Another $50 gift card from Reaper, so thank you very much to them for this. I know at the time of this recording, it's already ended, but Reaper Miniatures Bone 6, Tales from the Green Griffin, is on Kickstarter. You may have the opportunity to sign back up with it and maybe check out some of the cool minis that they've got that they're working on developing. And also right now, you should be able to still go on the website and purchase this special relief effort miniature. It's based on the national bird of Ukraine. It's a little Kenku-like bard, and it's very cute. I believe it costs $10, and of that, $7.50 gets allocated to UNICEF for relief efforts in Ukraine. And if you want to find out more about all the cool stuff that they've got in their catalog of miniatures, go to my website. Check the show notes below. Use that link I have when you go to shop on Reaper, because if you do so, you're supporting Sidekicks and Side Quests. By clicking that link, you're helping to track the traffic that our show directs towards Reapers. And so the more traffic, the more that our Texas powers combine. So again, go check that link out and be sure to follow Reaper Miniatures on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. All right, so of course, you remember here in the random encounters section, we like to do a little roleplay, a little vignette. And, well, the question here is, what kind of scene are we going to be doing? Are we doing a mask scene? Are we doing like a fantasy land where the collector meets one of the podcast NPCs? I remember last time Corvus got to meet Duncan or early on in his adventures, and Duncan has come a long way since then, but the podcast has also picked up a number of other characters since then too. So I leave it to you. What kind of scene are you interested in today?
Yeah, let's do a fantasy scene. I would really like to see how the collector does in a fantasy setting.
Okay. This podcast now has at least 4 different characters that have been developed that you can choose from. We, of course, have Duncan, the recklessly brave, chaotic, good, happy-go-lucky adventurer for hire. We have Sonia, the warrior woman, who started off as a barbarian and multi-classed into paladin. We have Korak, the lawful evil arcane trickster dwarf. And then we have Chrisley, who is a shy herbalist, botanist, wood elf druid who just also recently multi-classed into cleric. Or if none of those sound interesting to you, we can always create a new one to add to the roster.
I like that the shy druid cleric. I think the collector would be a really great character to kind of maybe pull them out of their shell a little bit.
Where we last left our hero, Chrisley, she was at a nearby seaside town where she met Daniil, the Cohenlin theologian who was looking to get her book back from one of the other dwellers in the town. And she was able to do that. And she bid her new friend Daniil farewell and continued on her journeys because even though she now is this cleric of the Zotani, she is a Zotani Nimi, she is a servitor of this the living voice. She also still has her mission, her charge from her people, from her wood elf woad tribe, and so she's out there collecting sketches of nature and all that stuff. I don't know, where is a place that Chrisley would meet the collector? What sounds like a good location?
Well, the collector is always traveling places, and so they could even just meet on the road at some point.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, Chrisley's on the road, and she's kind of lost in thought, absorbed with her sketching. She's just looking all around. She's almost like in a trance, and her body is moving on muscle memory, and she's just looking all around, and her fingers are just wildly going through her sketchbook, and kind of like that scene in iRobot where it's like the perfect sketch now. That's how good her artwork level has gotten now. The charcoal pen on paper, and it's like she's reproducing like gorgeous masterpiece level sketches, and then she just kind of bumps into the collector, and then that knocks her out of her trance, and she goes, ugh, and she gets startled. And when her eyes refocus and adjust, what does she see? Who does she see?
So she sees, this older gentleman, human, and he's wearing these very nice, but maybe slightly understated, robes of like a landed gentry individual. And he has this fine walking cane. And, he kind of nods at her and, says, "Oh, excuse me, my dear. I didn't see you there."
Oh, forgive me. I'm so sorry. And she like very sheepishly puts away the sketchbook, and she's like, I was just entranced by nature, and well, I mean, ever since I've been able to tap into this living memory, my art skills have become, much better than they were before.
Oh, you're an artist. Would you mind showing me some of your art? I'm a bit of a collector myself.
Yeah, sure. And she'll pull her sketchbook back out and she'll present it to you. And as the collector will open it and look, he'll see that there's various writings in it, some of it elvish, some of it druidic. And as you start at the beginning, you can notice like how amateurish it is and stuff. You definitely notice a shift as you go through. It's like watching an amateur become like a Rembrandt or something like that. You can just see the art level quality increase dramatically. Detailed, like super fine sketches of like fruit and flowers and bees and fauna and critters and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, and the collector will say, I'm noticing your clear love for nature. It's coming through strongly in your art here."
Oh yes, I'm from the Woad, and she'll kind of point to her ears and say, I was the chosen one to go out from the Woad and take the findings of nature, and a Zotani Nimi stopped into our village, and well, I accompanied him to the Zotani Nation, and you'll notice she like looks, kind of puts her hand on this other book, and then she's like, and now I'm one of the priests of the Zotani people. I have access to the living memory. And
Ah,
the collector would notice that this is like a big deal because normally it's like a priesthood reserved for human men. But the fact that she's a female wood elf who is now part of this priesthood is like certainly an astonishment.
yeah, the collector says, well, you must know a great many things then, being part of the living knowledge.
Yeah, it's she kind of chuckles and is like it can get a little fuzzy and confusing at times, but yeah, it's like I can tap into all these things that I didn't know before, and it's just I can experience, thousands of lifetimes of memories, just by, and then she'll sit there and you kind of see her eyes change color and like as if she's experiencing something, and then she kind of like chuckles to herself and she says, oh yes, yeah, yeah. She kind of chuckles. The collector is not one to be splashy with his crimes, right? Like, does he ever leave a calling card, or does he make it obvious that it's like him who took something?
He will, yes. So he often does, because he does want part of the thing is having the reputation.
Okay, and is it something that she would be able to see, that if she went through living memory that there might be like a slight chance that she would figure out who he is or something
Oh
like
yeah,
that?
I think so. I definitely think, people in that living memory have run into him before. He doesn't wear like a mask or anything. He just does it. And so yeah, I think she definitely might recognize him, especially his cane is very recognizable.
Okay, so she focuses on the cane, and you're seeing the eyes shift as she's like going back in memory, and then you kind of watch her demeanor sort of change, and she like tilts her head a little bit, and she's like, "Oh, oh, oh, you're an adventurer. You are the collector. You are someone of well renown."
It's always nice to be recognized, but I must say I am quite interested in some of this art. Would you be adverse to me adding some of it to my collection, maybe? For
Um,
for a fair price, of course.
oh, well, she thinks about it, and at first she's guarded, but then she realizes, like, she has living memory, and so she could just reproduce the sketches even better, and still be able to use it to report back to her community. And so she kind of reasons out and is like, well, I mean, druids aren't supposed to really have that much attachments anyway. So, I mean, I guess if it would bring you happiness and, would make you happy and add to your collection without having to break into someone's house, I suppose I could do that.
Well, thank you very much. And he selects a couple, and then he holds out a generous pouch of coins to her.
she'll take it because this is a custom that she's kind of had to learn, and obviously from living memory. And then she takes it and she accepts it, and she's like, well, certainly you were very generous, and well, is there anything that I can do to help you? And you look at her and you can see that she's like fairly well outfitted, the druid and then like the new multi-class into cleric. So she's kind of got like patchwork, like leather hide, maybe barely hints of metal. I know they say druids don't like metal armor, but with the cleric thing, she can kind of get away with it a little bit.
He says, well, now that you mention it, there is a green dragon I've been searching for some time.
Oh, ooh, nasty they are.
Yes, but they oftentimes have the best items.
Okay, and you need my help to find this dragon.
Yes, you seem like the type of person who might know where this dragon is.
She'll say, well, do you have any kind of idea? I mean, she points to the grimoire and she like points to her eyes, and you can see them beginning to like shift and change color.
Yeah, he will pull out a sketch of the green dragon with some identifying marks and give it to her.
Okay, and then she kind of does the very quickly zooms into the memories, and then she'll kind of like catch her breath and be like, oh, that one's nasty. Ooh, yes, he's very bad. He's very bad. Yes. Yes, I know the way. She is like startled as she says that, and she's like, yes, confidently. Yes, I do know the way. Yes, I can help you. Yes.
Well, thank you very much.
And then I suppose begins the journey of Chrisley and the collector, and I guess any retinue of the collector as they make their way down the road towards the lair of a green dragon. All right, and scene. Well, there we go. That was pretty cool. I like the collector. He seems rather nice.
Yeah.
I mean, we had, of course, Father Blake Britton on the show, who brought us Pathos Anthropoi, who introduced the lore of the Zotani Nimi to us. And so the fact that Chrisley now is this multi-classed druid cleric, which I don't know how many people take the opportunity to multi-class a druid and a cleric together. But yeah, it's a new thing for her.
We actually had a druid cleric multi in the Dungeon World campaign we ran, actually. So
okay.
Yeah, so that is something I'm familiar with.
Well, of course, we're here starting to get into final thoughts, so I always like to ask the guests what they thought of the random encounter. What did they think of their time, especially for you, a returning guest back on the podcast?
Yeah, I had a fun time, always like normal. And, I really think it's great having all of these, NPCs, and it's just a great resource, as a game master to be able to get ideas from this.
Corvus is a pretty popular episode that's been downloaded from this podcast. So if you haven't already listened to Corvus, the Arbiter of Chaos and Order, then you should definitely listen to that episode to put a little Kenku bird man judge in your game for antics and stuff. All right. Well, I like to leave the platform, the stage, the mic to the guests. So whatever you've got to plug, let us know where we can find you on social media, and let us know all the details about Doxacon.
Yeah, I'm not really on social media these days anymore, but Doxacon is. So you can find Doxacon on Facebook and Twitter, and at our website doxacon.org. And when this episode airs, the tickets should be on sale.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Silver, thank you so much for coming back on. I made good on the promise of having you back on, so that means I got to hold myself accountable for a three-peat and have you back on again.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Kurt.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sidekicks and Side Quests. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcast, Google Play, Spotify, and Overcast, or feel free to save the RSS feed to use the app of your choice. Visit our website, sidekicksandsidequests.com, for links, write-ups of the NPCs, and to learn more about the show and the guests who have been on it. To stay up to date and interact via social media, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit by searching for SideKQ Podcast. I would love to talk D&D and showcase your fan art, stories of how you used our NPCs, discussions, and commentary. If you would like to hail the bard, simply send an email to sidekicksandsidequests@gmail.com. To help this show be the resource it's meant to be, I ask that you please leave a review on iTunes to help spread the word and share our podcast with your friends and family. Whether you're a veteran player or an aspiring dungeon master, or you've never played Dungeons & Dragons before, there's something here for everyone, and I want to hear about it. And finally, after 2 years, I've decided to open a Patreon for Sidekicks and Sidequests. If you love this podcast and you want to help us grow and expand our operations, I would appreciate it if you would go on over to patreon.com/sidekicks and sidequests. No matter your lifestyle expenses, we have wonderful rewards at every level of Patreon membership tier. Your name on the wall of the levitating platter, a loud hurrah on the podcast, or the possibility to introduce an element of chance to NPC creation. Sidekicks and Sidequests is unofficial fan content permitted under the fan content policy, meaning I'm not approved or endorsed by Wizards. Portions of the materials used are property Wizards of the Coast, copyright Wizards of the Coast, LLC. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you at the pub next time.
Bar to rock on 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.